Suns fans, you know what time it is in the PHX.
Empire of the Suns.
Phoenix Suns.
Empire of the Suns.
If you're listening to this podcast, you are listening to live radio that is happening right now. Kevin and I are co-hosting the Bickley Marotta show. You can go back and watch it on your podcast feeds or listen to it. You can watch it on our site. You can listen to it on your podcast feeds as well if you want to hear us talk Cardinals, D-backs. We did a little college football, just a little bit here and there. We sprinkled it in there, but we're going to be talking about the Suns here over 2 segments that you're going to hear on your podcast feeds right now. Nassir Little, Kevin, he got waived and stretched in a move that is for tax reasons. They are going to save nearly $40 million in luxury tax payments over the next 2 years. That's according to John Hollinger from The Athletic. What that is going to do, similar to the campaign move, is it's going to allow them to save some money on the tax bill from a player they don't expect to be needed for them this year. Typically, a waive and stretch, if you guys aren't familiar, is you stretch out their salary. So Nassir Little is due $22 million over 3 years. Now they're going to be paying him those $22 million over 7 years. Typically, that is no bueno. It's no good. It's no good at all because you're making yourselves have all this dead money in the future, and it usually loses you money. But this is something where they do not expect to be a tax team in 4 years from now, 5 years from now, 6 years from now, when they're still paying Nas money. So if you can rip it right now, when you are this heavily taxed team, you can save all of this money. When you watched last year, the moments that he had on the floor, then he got hurt again. To remind everyone and reset the scene here, Nassir Little, which we talked about on our pod earlier this summer, had a stretch where he was getting played by Frank Vogel here and there, and he kept playing well. And eventually it was like, you're in the rotation. And then for 5 or 6 games, he was good. And then he got hit in the face, and then he had to wear a mask, and then a knee or an ankle thing, I can't remember which one, came up, and then he was gone for like 2 months, basically. And then by then, guess what? Bull's good. Guess what? We've traded for Royce O'Neal. You don't even have a shot to like prove yourself anymore. It's over for your time. And the decision that the Suns made here is everything they've seen behind the scenes and what they've seen on the floor that we've seen as well, is that he pretty much was never going to be someone who impacted their rotation next year or the year after that or the year after that. Do you agree with that decision?
We should have seen it coming. I think people saw a trade coming, but what this says is he had no trade value.
Zero.
At this point, like even though he's 23, 24, still relatively young, you don't see progress in his development. You see a lot of injuries on his resume, and at some point you just got to cut it loose, not only because of saving money, but again, leading into saying we should have seen it coming. They drafted Ryan Dunn. They re-signed Josh Okogie, which I said was redundant because those two guys are kind of going to be a little similar. They're different players, but they're going to eat up the same minutes. If you both expect them to be used, then where does that leave Nassir Little? So I see a lot of, like, it's not surprising they did this. But it just goes into the value around the league of Nassir Little was just not there anymore. And when you talk about what was he on a like $5 million per year deal, you can't get a lot for that, but you especially can't get anything useful for that if he doesn't have value. So that's where we stand. And I think in the bigger picture for me is we see this as, and also the David Roddy trade for E.J. Liddell. E.J. Liddell is also waived.
That saved them a little bit of money there as well. Both these moves were sort of cost-cutting for two guys who they thought didn't have a future.
Are these the first two cost-cutting moves by the Matt Ishbia era? I would say so. So we finally found something of a ceiling for, you know what? Let's chill a little bit. Like, we understand that we're going to pay lots of taxes, but we don't need to just lose tax $40 million and we don't need to.
Well, the Burns and Gambo show talked about this yesterday, and I think there is a non-zero chance that Nassir Little goes somewhere and is a good rotation wing, and you did the campaign thing again where you cut campaign, or you traded campaign to San Antonio, freed up a ton of tax money. You thought Jordan Goodwin was your backup point guard. You thought you had all these other ball handlers that could handle the ball, and it turns out you needed campaign, and you let him go in this situation. Look, Nassir Little, the thing is staying healthy. Here are his games played by season: 48, 48, 42, 54, 45. He hasn't even reached 55 games played yet in a season over the course of his career. He was a guy when the trade happened, really smart NBA people like Kevin Pelton looked at Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, and Nassir Little and said Little was the guy out of those three that is going to be the most valuable for the Suns in this trade. That did not wind up happening. I don't think it should retroactively make people feel worse about the trade because Grayson career year is going to be a mainstay in their rotation, or is he? We'll get to that in a second. Yusuf Nurkic has been solid for them. I know there are a lot of people listening who are not fans of what Yusuf Nurkic does, but the bottom line is he was a starting caliber center last year. You can't disagree with that. And they had little to no way of finding one with a DeAndre Ayton trade, and they somehow did. I think there is a chance where Nassir Little puts some things together here, finally gets healthy, lands on a team, and looks like the guy that the Suns need, because that's the funny thing about this move is that when we talk about a trade upcoming, because they have opened up a roster spot now there are still a couple of free agents out there that they could target. There are still names out there that they could sign. The most likely thing here is they keep this spot open, and so that way 2-for-1 trades are a lot easier for them to do because they have some beefier salaries. Now, Josh Okogie's salary got beefed up for a reason. Grayson Allen makes a lot of money. Royce O'Neal makes a lot of money. Yusuf Nurkic makes a lot of money. But the ideal trade for them, basically, is taking one of those guys, probably not Nurkic because they need him to be the starting center. Hey, maybe Plumlee's great and Oso's great as a rookie right away, and those are their two centers. I don't know. That maybe that's an outcome that could happen. I don't think so. You trade Grayson Allen, I wouldn't do that. You trade Royce O'Neal, I wouldn't do that. You trade Josh Okogie, I would probably do that. And you get two guys back, one of them being a 6'6", 6'8", 6'9" wing, really long wingspan, and is known for defense. Nas's defense was really good last year. Yeah. He was a really good defender. The guy that they're going to be trying to trade for is a good version of what Nassir Little is supposed to be in the league, which is what makes this the most interesting to me. Okay, let's roll through the names really quickly here. I'll include Kevin Durant just for the clickbait. Here we go. We're talking about Kevin Durant trade speculation. They can make the headline of the YouTube video.
I was thinking of doing this show, by the way, and like having a list of things that triggered you that you didn't want to talk about, but you just kind of hit one right there.
It doesn't even trigger me anymore. I'm just numb to it at this point, as you know. Okay, so trade candidates. We've got, is it Royce or Grayson who's eligible in October? One's eligible in October. One is eligible in January. I think it's Grayson in October.
Was sooner.
And then Royce in January. Right. You've got Yusuf Nurkic. You've got Josh Okogie. If the season goes really poorly, you start to speculate about Kevin Durant a little bit. If you had to pick one name right now who is going to get traded, who is it going to be?
Man, I wanted to go with Royce because it's a long-term deal. But that kind of hinders it. I honestly think this is out there. Nurkic could be that guy just because it's not as long of a contract. But the issue is, what do you get back for him? Who are you trading him to? And I don't have a good answer for that.
And what do you do at center if you trade him?
Exactly. People in their cars are yelling Josh Okogie right now is the most likely to get traded. Well, hold on. Like, what are you getting for Josh Okogie? Right. Because Royce has a lot of value. Grayson has a lot of value. I think Nurk has a decent amount of value. He's been posting a lot of videos of himself shooting threes. He's slimmed down. Maybe there's a new dimension to his game. But if that happens, I think the Suns would just want to keep him. Anyway, I think that it is Royce. I think that Royce is just, you want to find a jumbo version of Royce, essentially. I still think that continuity should be king on this team, and I don't think they should position themselves to have a roster where they need to make a trade in the middle of the season. But hey, maybe you find that type of deal for Royce. His deal, like Josh's, was sort of one where we thought, okay, this is like a movable contract. I didn't really think about that way as Grayson, but as everyone listening to the podcast knows, even people on this show right now listening to the show, I'm a huge fan of Grayson. I thought that he was fantastic for them last year. He was the one guy who played hard and was connected all year long. He didn't disconnect at any point. The shooting that he brings, the intangibles that he brings offensively, and then he was a sneaky good rebounder. He wasn't a good defender last year, but you could rely on him to just be there engaged, and you couldn't say that about pretty much anyone on the team besides Josh. Like, it was Josh and Grayson, and that was pretty much it. So we'll see where that goes from there. Kevin, earlier in the show, we talked about Nassir Little. Little gets stretched and released. It opens up an extra roster spot. But there was an intriguing part of this reporting, at least to me, where Shams Charania was the one to break that news initially. Included in his reporting, quote, Phoenix officials are high on rookies Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro, and the releases open increased opportunities for both to contribute next season, along with roster movement potential moving forward. Little now will enter free agency. I think the key 7 words there. Did he do it? He did it. Along with roster movement potential moving forward. I think that I interpret that as, if we are going to trade Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal. Again, Grayson Allen can't be traded till October. Royce, January, I believe. If we're going to trade Josh Okogie in that January window again, we feel confident enough in these guys moving forward. Oso is an interesting one to name because he's a center. So if you trade Nurk, you could put Plumlee or Oso into that starting role and then put the other guy down. That was the part of this that set off a couple of alarm bells for me where I was like, well, that was interesting that you included that there.
Well, here's the thing about those two. Both of them don't shoot. We've kind of covered that in our podcast, but I'm going to say it on the radio. They don't shoot. Pairing them together is going to be tough, but there are going to be spots where you could throw in Ryan Dunn. What position is he playing? I have no idea. Who's he playing with? It depends. Is Bol out there to space the floor? Are they going small? So I just think this team, compared to last year's team, just has a lot of different iterations. But them not being able to shoot will limit how you do it. And again, like if you're putting either rookie out there with the big three, like that's going to be easy. And you just get a fourth shooter. Name someone. Name Grayson Allen. I don't know. That's a small lineup, really small. So it's going to be about getting them, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. I don't see how they're going to be in the rotation heavily to start off the bat. But I think when you do inevitably hit injuries, you get deep into the season, blowouts or getting blown out, hopefully not for the Suns' sake, then you want to play them over Nassir Little, who, again, we talked about earlier, is, we've seen what he can do. He hasn't made big strides as far as his ultimate ceiling. He's dealt with injuries. So you want to invest more into the guys that you just drafted. And I think that's all interconnected.
So where does this potential scenarios come up? I'm looking at horrible handwriting that I just used to write up all 14 players on this roster. Okay. Tyus Jones not going anywhere. Devin Booker's not going anywhere. Bradley Beal's not going anywhere. Unless things go horribly wrong, Kevin Durant is not going anywhere. Yusuf Nurkic might be going somewhere. I think Monte Morris is an intriguing guy and an interesting guy to go over here because I wrote about it. We talked about it at the time. It just basically seemed like they got Monte Morris as this point guard, the version of this point guard they were expecting, and then it was like a holy crap, can we get Tyus Jones on the minimum thing that happened in late July? And now Monte Morris is in this weird spot of you probably guaranteed him a role or promised him some level of playing time. I think he's still going to play anyway, but he's a guy I'm going to name here. You got Grayson Allen, you got Royce O'Neal, you got Bol, and then you got Mason Plumlee. I expect those to pretty much be the 10 guys. I thought for sure I was going to call him Miles Plumlee at some point in this broadcast today. I guess I just did. But the point being, they got 10 guys there. So I'm trying to envision the scenarios, again, in which it elevates Ryan Dunn. It elevates also Ighodaro. And I think with Dunn specifically, it's with Allen and O'Neal. And then with Ighodaro, it just has to be Nurk because you can't, with the shooting problems that you mentioned, you can't just put him in there. Now, putting both in the rotation, I don't know, but something that you and I talked about ad nauseum leading up to the draft is that they had to come out of this draft not with the guy who has the highest potential or the highest ceiling, but you had to use this in a way like free agency where you are getting players to contribute next year, and all of the maneuvering that they did that we expected for them to do to land that pick to get Ighodaro. I think Ighodaro is more NBA ready than Ryan Dunn is right now. Ryan Dunn actually is someone who is, I don't want to define him as a project because he's got such a great definable skill that is really good at an NBA level right now with his defense and potentially even great right now with his defense. But Ighodaro is the more well-rounded guy right now, the guy that is more NBA ready right now. But as of right now, with their rotation looking the way that it is, neither guy I have penciled in the rotation. They don't need it. But I think that there was a long-term plan there in mind, and this might have been it. Now, who are they trading? Who are they thinking about trading when they're looking at these types of scenarios ahead of time? I don't know. Yeah,
and as the roster is constructed right now, for the lack of a better term, Ryan Dunn would get Jason Tatumed. Like, he plays the positions of the big three, and then, like, Royce O'Neal needs to play for, the spacing and shooting. Grayson needs to play for the shooting. And so, honestly, to your point about Ighodaro, I think he actually slots in better, and you could play him, say, like, him and Bol come off the bench at the 4 and the 5. Which one is the 4 and the 5 depends on matchups and depends on which side of the floor you're on if you're talking offense or defense. So that's kind of a fun pairing if you go super young, but Plumlee's there. So I see more of a pathway for him to play. Dunn, I think, could get in there if you start saying, we're not going to use a backup point guard. We're going to do Beal and Book in little spurts. Then there's a lot more pathway for Ryan Dunn to just be that defensive instigator guy and let the other guy initiate. So, yeah, it's a super unique roster, again, because of those two rookies and how unique their skill sets are. They're not traditional by any means at their positions.
The bottom line with this team is that they have to get more athletic. If we run through those 10 guys again, Tyus Jones, I would say, is a below-average athlete to the NBA level. He's still got speed and quickness, so that kind of stuff. Book, average to above average?
He's like right on average.
Brad, kind of the same sort of thing. I think Katie is the big-time outlier just because of his physical build. At this age, I think he's still got a bit of quickness to him, but I think he's above average and not just like on the all-time spectrum where he used to be. Nurk, below average. Monte Morris, below average. Grayson Allen, below average. Royce O'Neal, average to below average maybe. Bull, way up on the Kevin Durant scale, freak athlete. And then Mason Plumlee is a guy who you might have watched 5 years ago and thought correctly that he was way up there. He is not the same quick twitch guy that he once was, so he's below average. Ryan Dunn is way up there, and Oso Ighodaro is pretty high up there as well. That's
and Kogi.
Yep, and that's a big reason why to get those guys some playing time, specifically Dunn and Ighodaro. I'll go as far as to say it right now, declare right now on August 23rd, that backup center is a position battle. I do not think Mason Plumlee has the job right now. I do not think that it is a situation where he is locked in right there. I think if Oso Ighodaro impresses enough over the summer, which I think that he has already, and that he is going to continue to prove things in training camp and in the preseason, to use the football term, I really do think there's a chance that Oso is their backup center on opening night, because we saw flashes of it in Summer League. Again, it's Summer League. We're not talking about big explosive performances. We're just talking about Oso exploding to the rim or exploding to the ball. He is not a super duper quick twitchy guy, but even just the way he moves around the floor for an undersized center, they need that type of dynamic on their team. They've really been missing it for a while now.
If he gets a runway, he is actually, gravity at the rim. And I will say, does he have Cam Johnson energy to you, as far as just he has his professional life? He's I don't know, not put together as physically, but just he has everything together, it seems. He's a smart dude. Works hard, obviously, and I just see him being ready to take that on if he wins the job, and his style of play is what they need more than Mason Plumlee. Yes,
I will go as far as with Ryan Dunn to say this again. I haven't said this since the Tyus Jones things. I'll say it now, and I know what the weight of it means. If Ryan Dunn is knocking down shots and Mike Budenholzer trusts him to do everything correctly on the court for a rookie, he will start by the end of the season. He will start. That's how good of a defender that he is. If he's knocking down shots, if he's an average three-point shooter, Brad. Yeah. If you want to hear any more thoughts like that, you can listen to the Empire of the Suns podcast that is going to end right now, because this is Kellan recording the outro for the episode that they are going to turn this into. Goodbye, everyone.